Hi guys, I'm Shmi and today I'm visiting Romans International where I'm surrounded by some rather nice cars, and in fact in the showroom there's also a McLaren P1 and a Ferrari Enzo. So we'll go and have a look in there in a moment, but firstly I need to head round to the back because there is a very specific car that I have come today to take a look at. Surrounded here then by some Bentleys, many Range Rovers. Over on this side we've got the twisted Defenders. But this is the car of the day, the Mercedes-AMG GT. Now, as you have already seen from the title of this very video, there is a particular question on my mind which you might find rather surprising. And that is, should I buy a Mercedes-AMG GT S? Now, I'll explain the reasoning behind this in a moment because you probably know I have the AMG GT R on order to come later this year, but I've popped down to Romans because I wanted to take this car out for a test drive. Now, this is actually the AMG GT, the kind of regular version, the non-S version, but this is a very nicely spec'd and equipped one in the Iridium Silver with the premium package. So I'm going to take it out, we'll talk a little bit about the car now, then I'll explain why I'm asking this question in the first place. So this car, up front, the 4-litre twin-turbo V8 unit from AMG, 462 horsepower, 600 Newton-meters of torque. That means 0 to 62 is 4 seconds, top speed is 187 miles an hour. So those figures are a little bit behind the 510 horsepower and 650 Newton-meters of the S version, but they're not exactly shabby, are they? Rear-wheel drive GT car with a decent boot. Pretty nice looking, isn't it? I've always had a soft spot for the AMG GT since it came out. Well, I always had a soft spot for the SLS as well, so I think it was a given. But up to this point, I've not actually owned a Mercedes. Now, I'm going to take it for a drive in a mo, but I want to firstly explain a little bit more about today's question and why I'm asking you guys, I guess, for some input and thoughts. So my AMG GT R is going to arrive, I guess, in 6 months' time, maybe somewhere in the summer. I guess July, maybe August. Depends when deliveries and allocations are done. They haven't done any for the UK yet, so nobody knows when their car is going to come. And before that, I've got quite a few road trips on the agenda. I've got a big tour around the Geneva Motor Show. Then I've got a big Where's Shmi tour around Top Marks Monaco. Then I'm doing the Street Gasm Rally. I've got a couple of other trips through the sort of May-June part of the summer. So I'm going to do a lot of miles. And basically for my road trips, I've got the FF and the LT. The GT8 I don't want to use for motorway journeys because it's a little bit too special. The FF I don't really want to bore you with because I've done so many trips with it up to this date and used it and done many, many miles. The LT, I can't do everything in the LT or I'm going to end up with a car with no value in it whatsoever because of how many miles I've done. So it got me thinking, what car am I going to use for some of these kind of lengthy trips around Europe? It's really good for motorways, long distance, and can take some luggage if I'm not using the FF. And is quite sporty when I get to exciting places on the other end. And obviously the Focus RS is great, the Mini's not going anywhere near that stuff, but the Focus RS isn't really a supercar, is it? So I don't want to use the FF for everything, and I've always had, like I said, a soft spot for the AMG GT. In fact, I nearly bought one once before, but you don't know about this because, well, it didn't happen in the end. Then Paul Supercars of London got one, and I've always loved his car, but of course he recently sold it, and I don't want you guys on YouTube to not be seeing some content with an AMG GT. So I've come down, I'm going to take this out for the drive. I'll show you the inside now before we head out in it. And basically why I'm interested, I guess, in the AMG GT or the GTS. Comfortable, nice seats, luxurious, just quite baller. Here's the information about this specific car from Romans. Nearly new in effect, 740 miles on the clock, £92,000 with a couple of options, but they come incredibly well equipped from the factory. There's not that much you need to add to it, and I've completely failed to close that door there, which is awkward. But I want to also just open up the boot, because this is one of the reasons why this car is of interest to me. You've got nearly 300 litres of luggage room, 350 if you use the whole thing, and basically that means road tripping is a non-issue. Very easy to do. So it's a strange one, because I appreciate it's a little bit funny, but wouldn't it be quite fun to drive a GT or a GTS in the build-up period to the arrival of the GTR? Let me just close this door, head round and start the car up. I don't know whether the GT or the S would be the right one. So, here we are. This is quite familiar. I've not driven the GT or the GTS before, but the start button is right here. The the V8 comes to life. It's a very, very good sound in this car. Oh, we're already up to temperature, how brilliant. So you can, exhaust button here as well. Anyway, let's take it out, short little drive, and see what I think. Out on the roads then, and the first thing you notice by far is how long the bonnet is. It just stretches out and away from you. And also, I think, quite surprisingly to me, the ride is a little bit firmer than I expected. Obviously, you've got variable settings, and this car has the AMG ride control, so you have 3 different selectable modes for how firm you want it to be. I'm actually in the most comfort end of everything at the moment. We're driving in comfort mode because you have the selector in the center console, put it up into sport. That will make it slightly more aggressive from a driving point of view, but it still doesn't have the exhaust valve open unless you press the button for that, or you can go up into Sport Plus, and everything gets very, very firm and a little bit shoutier. And if we blip down some shifts, you get some of the backfire and crackles, which we all love. And this car, I mean, it has the sort of 2 characters, because it is a GT car, it's a long distance cruiser, but it's also a car where you can do this and then accelerate a little bit and have some fun on a nice countryside road, or let's say a nice road in the Alps. And you have the good old noise of the V8 behind you. I think the thing that is surprising me is the firmness of it. I think when I drove the GTR, people were saying it was a little bit more compliant, and I can believe it now. That is good. That is very good. I mean, the noise alone, I don't know how Mercedes do this. Make a twin turbo engine sound this good. But somehow they've done it. So, let's think about this. As a GT car then, if you're out on the motorway, the seat is comfortable, the steering is sort of nicely weighted. You can see how it's sort of built with that in mind, to be playful at the other end, but to do you a good job on the road there. You've got all your luggage space, there are plenty of sort of storage buckets and compartments and things where you can put stuff. And all of that we know from the GTR. That's the reason why I've bought the GTR, or ordered the GTR. It feels like a bit of an animal, you know. I've popped it back into comfort, where you can immediately notice it's significantly softer. But thinking about the seats, this car has the standard seat. The S, by default, has the performance seat, which is slightly firmer, or you can opt to have it this way as well if you prefer. And of course in the GTR, I will definitely be ordering the bucket seat, because I preferred that. I found the performance seat almost a little bit firm, so I might be trying, if I'm doing this, to try and find a car with these seats, with the sort of more comfort seats, because I think it fits more into at least what I'm seeing my usage of the car being. It's mostly a motorway cruiser, a cool motorway cruiser that is quite fun to drive and sounds awesome. And initially, I'm definitely thinking that, even with the exhaust valve off, it's sounding pretty good. Surprisingly good, actually. So just cruising along, it's where you can then open up the valve as well if you so choose, and then there's another button to put it manual only on the gearbox so that it won't automatically shift back. Go over a bump. But you know, you can cruise along, 30 miles an hour, here's some V8, get some burbles and crackles. And this is just the GT, not the GTS. I feel like even the GT could well be powerful enough. You don't necessarily need that extra, about 50 horsepower or so in the S. So I wouldn't ignore just a GT. Well, it still goes fairly decently, that's for sure. Sounds good at the top end of the rev range. How have they made it sound this good? Reluctant to sort of put my foot down completely because it's still a little bit greasy, and with all the power to the rear and the weight over the front, traction control is going to be lighting it up everywhere. That is half the fun of the car. That's part of the character of it, isn't it? Oh, that's nice. Away we go then. Oh, you get the nice crackles in Sport Plus as well. Yes, that's how we like it. That's just completely standard exhaust as well. I mean, as we know from Paul's with the Rentec, you can make it sound fairly monstrous. Far more shifts than I need just for a bit of sound here. And this is with the suspension currently in the hard mode. You can soften that up, so even keeping it in Sport Plus with the crackles, with the exhaust noise, you can still put the ride control into comfort. I like that kind of individualization, so you can actually use the individual mode completely and set it up how you like, and obviously that's how I would do it. Noisy, crackly, and sporty where possible, except for suspension where you want it comfortable. I think the weirdest thing when filming this video is that right now my mind is completely in two places, because obviously I'm half thinking about the car and trying to take it in on a short test drive and whether I would like to buy one or this car, and half thinking about the video that I'm shooting for you guys, whereas normally I'm just out making my sort of typical video about the car, not necessarily for myself, whereas in here is the whole sort of like extra thinking I'm trying to do. So I apologise if I come across a little bit differently as a result of that, but we're going to head back and then I'll try and wrap up. Rolling back through then, and this is where that length of the bonnet is really plays with the mind. It is so big. And I'll park the car up here and press park and shut it off. Nice, but I do also like the panoramic roof a lot, by the way. This is going to be a bit of a tough one. I really quite enjoyed that, but I'm not necessarily sure if it makes any sense to do this, because obviously if I bought that car or another AMG GT or a GT S, it's going to depreciate slightly and I'm going to lose a little bit of money on it, but that might actually save money versus the other cars, or depending how else I'm going to work out what to do with the different trips I'm going on, because this year I am going to do tens and tens and tens of thousands of miles on road trips. So when I say I want another car for the purpose, it's not that I'm scared of doing mileage in my own cars, it's that I'm scared of doing ridiculous amounts of mileage in highly limited special cars that I want to keep long term and not basically devalue them to me because I'm over familiar with them, or devalue them literally in terms of what they're worth because of how many miles I've done on them. So this is, I think now after my drive, sounding like an interesting prospect to me. But would you guys, what would you think if I was driving an AMG GT S on, say, Streetgasm and say Where's Shmee this year alongside the LT and the GT8 being shipped? I think it's good for transporting my luggage and saving the mileage, but we'll see. I've got some thinking to do. Just interested in opinions about this car in general. I like the panoramic roof, as I just mentioned. I think I'll be looking for one in a fairly standard kind of spec. There are lots out there, but down the line, not right now. I should just reiterate that because I've got, what do I have? February, I'm completely chocker, traveling everywhere, left, right and centre. Wait for this, there's a lot of cool stuff. And then beginning of March, I'm doing the FF tour that you will see in due course when I let you know some more. For now though, I'm going to wander into the showroom and show you some of the highlights. In here we have a couple of SLSs, including over here the SLS GT. Becoming quite collector's pieces those now. And we've got a yellow F12 Berlinetta, which does look really good in yellow, followed by an Aventador. Then we've got a DB11 in Diavolo red, which is such a nice colour. And I'm going to come around and show you the interior of this because it's very bold but striking. I think that works really, really well. And it has red seat belts as well, which you can see in the back there. Instant win in my book. It's a super, super nice colour. We've got an Aurora Blue 650S Spider before we come through to where the hypercars are, and the Enzo, the car that wears Enzo Ferrari's name himself, and a car I was actually fortunate enough to drive quite recently thanks to Greg B. Had to go behind the wheel of a Ferrari Enzo, and what a special experience that was too. And then over here, the Volcano Yellow P1 Satin Race Mode. One of my dream hypercars. Stunning machine. Before a little lineup of LTs, we've got an LT Coupe at this end. Before two Spiders. As we come up here, this is quite a high spec for a Spider. It's got the matte carbon roof, I notice. I didn't quite like that, certainly not on a bright colour, but against the sort of chicane grey, it works pretty well. That's it for now, so it's a big thanks from me to Romans International for letting me come down and drive the car today. I've put their social links down below, do check them out, they always have some pretty interesting stock coming in and out. But the question is, should this key end up in my pocket? And I don't quite know. Let's find out in due course, but thank you very much for watching guys, really appreciate it as always. I'll catch up with you again soon. Cheers!